Premier Sample Library. It's a repository for drill cuttings from wells going back from the 1940s until the present day, and it's the only one of its type that's a public repository.
So all these boxes are cutting samples from wells that have been drilled, some more recently, some are older, from a whole host of different operators in the Permian Basin. And each box has 60 to 100 samples of actual rock material from the formations that these operators are drilling. And we can use this material to tell us more about the actual geology in the basin. Some of the samples from the older wells are in, differing shapes. Most of them are actually incredibly well preserved from being, 70 years old at this point. We're not just cataloging all these samples. We're, accepting donations, taking these materials and actually generating data on them, useful data that operators can apply to their own workflows for exploration, for correlating different units throughout the basin, for refining their geologic and petrophysical models within a certain region, or tracing a particular bed or set of beds from one side of the basin to another side of the basin.
Yeah, when I first started into the business, we'd go down to the library. They had an index card set of every well that was in the library. When Premier took this over, they're providing a digital database so we know what we have there and what's accessible. And now it's going to provide much more value to operators here in the basin.
This data can be used from anything from frontier exploration in terms of trying to better understand what's the quality of the rock in this area that I've never even gone into, to field development of areas where there's already a lot of information and data available in that area, but our data kind of takes that data to the next level. So everything from exploration to development, we even have workflows where we provide optimized completion strategies. So even going all the way to completing a well and producing from it, you can use this data.
When it comes to resources like sidewall cores or cuttings specifically, when we access an old field, when we take over an old field that maybe was a legacy field from the 40s or 50s, those cuttings are something that we don't have access to because we weren't the original company that drilled the wells. But if they're in a sample library that we can go get, we can analyze, and we can learn, quite frankly, that lost bit of information that the original company, the original Exxons or Mobils knew that information, but those files have been long destroyed. With all the new technology that we have today, it's exciting to see what new data we can pull out of stuff that, quite frankly, has been kind of, I don't want to say forgotten, but it's kind of been warehoused, and everybody says, it's just old data, old cuttings, old rocks. It's just, we can't learn anything from it, but this new technology that we're doing, and it's just come alive.
I've been associated with these buildings for probably, I'm going to have to say 24 years. When I was over across the street with the Midland Oil Scouts, I remember the semi-trucks that would come up and down the alleys dropping off samples for us to cut.
Most companies mudlog their wells and collect samples. It's the one time that you can get that actual rock data from a well you drill. If you don't capture those samples then you never have that data. So fortunately, the companies I've worked for through my career, Texaco, Chevron, Fasken Oil and Ranch, we mudlog every well we drill. So we have a set of cuttings for every well. We stored those cuttings at the International Sample Library, do paleontology or geochemical analysis on those cuttings.
One of the things that we're doing is we're building basin-wide studies, utilizing and leveraging the materials we have here. And the core of those studies are inorganic and organic geochemistry. We're collecting XRF data, that's elemental data, tells you about the composition, elemental composition of the rocks. XRD, which is X-ray diffraction, that's mineralogical data. TOC, total organic carbon, and pyrolysis, which tells you about the source rock maturity and the different shale plays in the area. A lot of times I think as geoscientists, we see the data, we see the end result of the analysis. The actual materials themselves are equally as important. We need to make sure that these cuttings are truly representative of the formations that they're being taken from. We want to take these samples and bring that system into the 21st century as well, so that you can have access to this data on a common platform. You can actually use this material with these new analyses. We can evolve beyond just having rock material sitting in a warehouse. Premier has developed an online platform to provide access to this data that we're generating and access to photos of the material, any information you want on the material stored at the sample library.
Talking about the cuttings library, went back and pulled some logs from 4 different wells and looking at the unconventional part, and actually did this chemostratigraphy that we talk about in those 4 different samples and used it in the Wolfcamp to define if there was a valuable resource in an untapped zone over in New Mexico. We had 4 wells that were all across the basin, that one was in western Eddy County and all the way through Lee County. And we were able to analyze through these cuttings if there was an organic, rich, unconventional reservoir that was untapped. And we were able to look at these 4 wells and determine 2 of them looked great, 1 of them looked marginal, and 1 of them looked pretty poor. Just the open hole log data that we had, they looked fairly similar. So this really kind of put us into a different ball game where we could say these are better rocks, these are poorer rocks, let's concentrate here.
From my perspective as a geologist and a geoscientist, this is the actual rock data. This is the material from the formations at depth. These aren't indirect measurements, these are direct measurements. You get to actually see the rock itself. You can see the different facies in the core. You can try to pick out some of that information from the cuttings. It's all a puzzle. Geology is a big puzzle, and these are the pieces that you can use to put that puzzle together.